Welcome to today's program, Promoting Voter Registration and Engagement, What Nonprofits Can Do. This program is sponsored by our partners, the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County, Southeast Asian Educational Development of Wisconsin, YWCA Southeast Wisconsin, and the City of Milwaukee Election Commission. My name is Frank Martinelli. I'll be the moderator for today's program. We've assembled a team of experts with extensive knowledge and experience in all aspects of nonprofit involvement in voter registration and education. As we get started, I'd like to introduce our presentation team to you. First, Michele Goldstein. She's a member of the nonprofit outreach team of the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County. She's played a key role in training nonprofit staff and volunteers on voter registration. Jackie Boynton, an attorney with deep knowledge about the legal aspects of nonprofit involvement in voter registration and education. We also have with us Neil Albrecht. Neil is the Executive Director for the City of Milwaukee Election Commission and oversees all aspects of local election management, candidate filing, and campaign finance reporting for the City of Milwaukee. Mywah MOA, Executive Director of Southeast Asian Educational Development of Wisconsin, one of our featured case studies on nonprofits successfully involved in voter registration. And Paula Pennebaker, Vice President and CEO of the YWCA Southeast Wisconsin, our other featured case study. So let's continue. Let me provide a quick overview of the topics we'll cover in this program. We'll start with why nonprofits need to be engaged in voter registration, education, and engagement work. Then Jackie Boynton will cover the legal aspects of nonprofit involvement in voter registration and engagement. Neil Albrecht will cover voter registration and voting in Wisconsin. I'll talk about making the decision within your nonprofit to carry out this important work. And then Mywah MOA and Paula Pennebaker will share their experience with their nonprofits in voter registration and education. Then Michele Goldstein will provide an overview of available resources for nonprofits, and then we'll end with a call to action. So let's talk about why nonprofits need to be involved in the important work of voter registration, education, and engagement. Why should nonprofits be involved? Because they have a crucial role to play. For a number of reasons, nonprofits are ideally positioned to lead on voter registration and education efforts. First of all, nonprofits operate in virtually every community and neighborhood. They have a deep understanding of the problems facing communities, and they understand the systemic barriers to change. They've provided valued services for a long time, and as a result, many nonprofits have unparalleled reach into low-income communities that have been historically underrepresented in the political process. They have strong relationships of trust with countless community leaders and residents. And in a moment, we'll learn that there are no legal barriers to nonprofit voter registration and education work. So really, there's nothing holding us back. Now, let's cover some of the legal aspects. There is still a lot of confusion and misinformation out there about what nonprofits can and cannot do. Jackie Boynton, our legal expert on the subject, will help set the record straight for us. Jackie?
Hi, I'm happy to talk about this important topic. When we use the term nonprofit, we also mean 501c3 organizations or public charities. These are all interchangeable terms for organizations that are tax exempt and can receive tax-deductible donations. Nonprofit organizations are legally allowed to do voter registration and get out the vote work. This is to educate voters impartially on a nonpartisan basis. Nonprofits are not allowed to do for and against candidate electoral campaign work. And we will talk more about what that means. But we are allowed to conduct or promote voter registration. You can do this kind of voter registration drive at your nonprofit or in the community. You can encourage people to vote in your organization's communications, at events, and on a website. Nonprofits may also target certain populations that are typically underrepresented at the polls, including low-income neighborhoods, minorities, low turnout groups, homeless, or student populations, to get them to exercise their right to vote because they are underrepresented. You can also educate voters on the voting process, where to vote, when to vote, getting an absentee ballot, or how to contact your local election office for help. And you can also remind people on registration and election deadlines and dates. Also, nonprofits can host candidate forums or debates. The format can be sequential candidates appearing or candidates all together. You just need to make sure that you invite all the candidates and that you have a neutral moderator. And the questions should be wide-ranging. Sometimes it's best to work with other organizations putting these kinds of events on. You also can create a candidate questionnaire where the purpose is to educate the voters impartially on a nonpartisan basis. You submit questions to all the candidates in a race on issues of interest to your nonprofit. No bias in the questions. Use open-ended questions. Probably have a word limit. You can publish the candidates' full answers on your website or in a nonpartisan voter guide to educate voters. You also can publish legislative scorecards, which would be legislative votes of incumbents. Your organization can distribute sample ballots or nonpartisan voter guides. You can display an official sample ballot that highlights an election common in your area for all the voters. You can continue issue advocacy during an election. Issue advocacy is communicating positions on the usual issues that you work on that are related to your exempt purpose or your mission, such as educating the public on health care, gun violence, environmental protection. You can continue that work. You also can continue any lobbying activities during the election period as long as it's what you've been doing throughout the year. Nonprofits can also support or oppose a referendum or ballot measure. An example of this is the 2006 referendum in Wisconsin for a constitutional amendment invalidating same-sex marriage. Unlike candidates for office, nonprofits may take sides on these issues. The voters in these types of referendums are considered the legislators on ballot measures, so we can appeal to them as we would when we're doing regular lobbying activities. You just need to record the time as you would for your regular lobbying activities. You can have your board take a position on the ballot and you can communicate this to the community. We also can encourage people to vote and do get out the vote activities. Send reminders to your constituents and letting them know why voting is important. You can conduct these activities as long as it is suggesting to people that they need to participate as a voter and not suggesting who to vote for. What is prohibited? Nonprofits cannot endorse a specific candidate, and that includes municipal, school board, county, state, federal elections. Nonprofits may not make a campaign contribution for or against a candidate. You can't give anything of value to candidates, political parties, or political committees. You cannot rate or rank candidates on who is the most favorable to your issues. You can't let candidates use your facilities or resources, but if you make them available equally to all candidates at fair market value, then there is a possibility they can use your facilities or could buy access to your email list. In summary, you can advocate for involvement in the voting process, just not for or against specific candidates.
Jackie, thanks very much. So, how do you register to vote in Wisconsin, and how does the registration process work? We'll now have Neil Albrecht, Executive Director of the City of Milwaukee Election Commission, demonstrate how easy the process is, even with some of the recent changes to election law in Wisconsin. Neil?
Thank you, Frank. And as we heard from Jackie, since we now know that nonprofit 501c3s are able to register voters, maybe a question might be, how complex is the voter registration process? It's actually a very easy process. It involves basic data entry on a very user-friendly site called WizVote. And there's 3 easy steps in terms of registering a person to vote. First is, you're going to want to have a conversation with the person that you may be registered and first determine whether or not they are qualified to vote. And the qualifications to vote are they need to be a U.S. citizen, they should be 18 years of age by the next election, and they cannot currently be serving probation or parole for a felony conviction at the time you would be registering them. Very important to note, there's a lot of confusion around this, that if a person has a felony conviction but is off paper, meaning they've completed their probation or parole, their voting rights are reestablished, and you can go ahead and register that person to vote. But if they're currently on paper at that time, they would not be qualified to vote. The other conversation you'd want to have with that voter is there a need for them to register to vote? In other words, are they a first-time Wisconsin voter, or have they had a name change or address change since the last time they registered to vote? Assuming that the answers to those questions would be yes, then you would advance to step number 2, which would be to confirm that the person has a Wisconsin driver's license or a Wisconsin state ID. Both of these are DMV issued IDs. It doesn't matter if the address on the ID is not current. As part of the registration process, you can actually go into the DMV's website and update that person's address. So all you need to do is confirm that they have the driver's license or the state ID. From there, you can log on to the Mywah Wisconsin website, and you're going to enter all the information from the voter, beginning with that voter's name and their birth date, and then you'll be able to identify if there's already information in the system related to that voter. And you'll see on these next screens how user-friendly this system really is. This is the main page to the Mywah Wisconsin website. And if you have someone with you that you would like to register to vote, you would just click onto the right and choose the Register to Vote feature. From there, you'll go into the beginning of the data entry screens, and you're going to enter that person's name, date of birth, and it's going to do a search to see if there's any previous information on that person that can be matched in the voter registration database. And again, if the address on the person's driver's license or state ID is not current, as part of that process, you'll be able to go right in and update that as another service for that individual. The next steps relating to the voter registration process, once you've completed entering all of their data, are also pretty critical to the voter registration process, because we don't just want to register people to vote. We want them to vote, to participate in the democratic process, and to actually become frequent voters. So there's some helpful tips and information you can provide that person. First of all, from the My Vote Wisconsin website, where you've just entered their data, you'll be receiving their polling place, where they would go to cast their ballots in upcoming elections. Feel free to share that with the individual so they do know where to go on election day. Secondly, you're going to want to review with them Wisconsin's photo ID requirement. Again, when they go to vote, they'll need to have with them either a Wisconsin driver's license, state ID, passport, military ID, or some student IDs are also acceptable. And then finally, you're going to want to encourage that person to enroll in a nonpartisan pledge to vote campaign like the one offered by the League of Women Voters. By registering, this person will then receive reminders prior to every election on the date of the election, voting requirements, and it will further encourage them to exercise their right to cast a ballot in that election.
Thanks very much, Neil. Now, we'd like to offer some suggestions on how to actually make the decision within your nonprofit to carry out voter registration and engagement activities. Now, we know that there is still a lot of variety in the nonprofit sector, so one size doesn't fit all in terms of decision making. Here are some things to consider, though. First, think about how you will make the case for nonpartisan voter registration. Share what the law allows and encourages. Make the connection between voter registration and education work with your mission and strategic plan priorities. Next, determine the actual who and how of decision making. Is this a decision that the board of directors makes? Or is this something that the executive director or CEO can decide to move on right away? For example, if we've previously decided in a strategic planning process that we want to begin to engage in voter registration, well, that approved plan by the board really gives the green light to the executive director and staff to move in that direction. And then finally, be clear about who is responsible for doing the work. The board of directors certainly has a role to play, and the executive director or CEO and her or his staff also have responsibilities in this important work. We need to be clear with each other about who does what. Today's program features 2 case studies to describe the successful experience of 2 Milwaukee area nonprofits that have incorporated voter registration, education, and engagement in their work. They are Southeast Asian Education Development of Wisconsin and YWCA Southeast Wisconsin. In the 2 case studies, we'll hear why they engage in voter registration, their decision process, how they've undertaken this work, and the lessons learned, what they'd like to share with the rest of us. We'll start with Mywah MOA, Executive Director of Southeast Asian Educational Development of Wisconsin. Mywah?
Thank you, Frank. Southeast Asian Educational Development of Wisconsin is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our mission is to create a thriving Southeast Asian American community. Our organization has participated in voter education and voter registration since 2014. We work closely with our partners in the Asian and Pacific Island American communities in the Milwaukee area, such as the Organization for Chinese Americans, the Muslim community, the Sikh community, the United Chinese Americans, and APIA Vote, a national organization in Washington, D.C., who provides valuable resources and training for us. We also work closely with our local non-Asian partners, such as the Wisconsin Voices and the League of Women Voters, for guidance and resources. Now, why are we doing this work? The Asian and Pacific Island Americans, or the APIAs, are currently the fastest growing populations in the United States. This stems from the fast growing numbers of Asian immigrants and Southeast Asian refugees coming from Asian countries in the last 2 decades. Many of us come to the United States under circumstances which forced us to find refuge from prosecutions in our countries. We are here to stay, and we will work alongside Americans to help make this country a better home for us and our children. As APIAs, we recognize that decisions are made by and at various levels of government which have impact on our day-to-day lives. We know that we play important roles that contribute to the economic strengths in our respective communities. Therefore, we need to engage in what is happening in our cities, state, and around the country. In spite of our exercising our rights to vote, we realize that we also have to have representation at all government levels to make sure that our needs are voiced and are addressed. Because if we are not at the table, we will be on the table. So how are we doing this? We started by building infrastructures among the Asian and Pacific Island Americans by developing partnerships to strengthen our efforts. We reached out to core community leaders of the Asian and Pacific Islander Americans, or the APIA communities in the Milwaukee area, to educate them about the importance of working together. We feel that it is important that people have good skills to lead people within our communities. We want to make sure that they are conducting nonpartisan activities to empower our people to make informed voting decisions. We partner with local, state, and national organizations to provide leadership training for our APIA communities through the leadership trainings. We develop framework for civic engagement and tools to help individuals work with their respective communities. We bring in key leaders from the APIA partner organizations to speak to our community members in the Milwaukee area to encourage participation and to continue to work together. Through our outreach activities, we partner with local organizations to conduct voter education and voter registrations at community centers, churches, temples, mosques, schools, clinics, markets, and our community gatherings. We also use translated educational materials of different languages to help our communities understand their voting rights and responsibilities, so that they can cast their votes and make decisions on educated information. And we also encourage eligible voters to take part as poll workers on election days to gain experience and insights. Now, what did we learn through our work? Well, one very important thing we learned is that we cannot work in silos. We stand stronger working together as Asian and Pacific Island Americans. We also learned that we need to work closely with our counterparts to help us with guidance, resources, and as our allies. During our outreach activities, we found that many APIAs do not understand why they need to go out and vote on non-presidential election years, and what seats need to be filled, at what different levels of offices, and how they impact our community. Oftentimes, voters ask the volunteers who they should vote for. Because we are a nonprofit organization with a 501c3 status, we know that we cannot tell voters who to vote for. So therefore, we will have to work with our partner organizations to translate information of our candidates and their positions, so that we can share that with our community, so that they can make more informed decisions on who they want to vote for, and not having us tell them who to vote for. Ongoing education is a must not only in the Asian and Pacific Island American communities, but across all races. Not everyone understands their voting rights and how to exercise them. The education need to include elections at various government levels, and that various office elections do not always fall on presidential election years. Ongoing voter registrations need to be conducted because new American citizens are sworn and welcomed throughout the year, and people are moving and need to re-register. Immigrants and refugees need classes to help them understand the American history so that they can become contributing U.S. citizens. Organizations hosting these classes may not be accessible to some people due to location or because of transportation issues, or the hours they offer those classes just do not fit our busy schedules. The partner organizations need to develop and hold classes or find where classes are closest and accessible to our immigrant and refugee populations. Our young populations are growing up, becoming of voting ages. Voter education and registration needs to be more present in high school settings. It is important for us to start educating our children at young ages so that they understand their roles and responsibilities as citizens of the United States of America. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mywah, and thank you for the leadership that your organization exercises in our community. Our second featured case study is YWCA Southeast Wisconsin. Paula Pennebaker, President and CEO, will share the YWCA's experience with us now. Paula?
Thanks, Frank. We're going to talk about our story from the perspective of why we do what we do, how we do it, and what we've learned over the years. Voter engagement fits the YWCA's mission of eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all, and is in keeping with our history of political activism that dates back to the early days of our founding, to leadership in the women's suffrage movement, and to bold leadership in the civil rights era. Electoral issues today tie directly to YWCA's work in three signature areas: racial justice and civil rights, empowerment and economic advancement of women and girls, and health and safety of women and girls. So how do we do what we do? We trained a core group of staff on voter engagement. We maintain frequent multi-person registration teams and situated them in high traffic areas in the building. We conducted registration along with other business. And what that means is, while providing help to address basic needs, having our trained staff ask people if, for an example, they're registered to vote was easy in the course of doing their work. And particularly important, as a population of people we serve is very mobile. We relied on the availability of additional resources through partnerships and collaborations with organizations like Wisconsin Voices, Vote Riders, and Citizen Action. We had staff where registered to vote asked me questions, and we featured a large vote banner in our lobby and posted eye-catching flyers in over 12 locations throughout the buildings. We distributed I Pledge to Vote cards and buttons and followed up with reminder texts, calls, and email messages with everyone we interfaced with. Another comment about partnerships is that we relied on the availability of additional resources when staff was consumed by their paid work, and more partners means more pathways to spread the word. The next slide shows here examples of the things mentioned previously. Flyers that were posted throughout the building that show the dates for elections, how to get an ID, and our Pledge to Vote cards. What we learned from the work that we did is that one thing we learned that it's good to have an adaptable approach. We believe that being flexible and nimble helps to create the greatest impact. We think that it's good to explore new initiatives and embrace partnerships because it expands our reach and lends additional credibility to our efforts by having partnerships with other well-known organizations. Finally, we think it's good to assume that in all things, it helps to believe that people want to do the right thing. For people that have lots of barriers to success in their lives, not all of which are of their own making, it isn't surprising to understand why voting seems pointless to them. We encourage them anyway.
Paula, thanks very much for the great work that your organization does and for sharing so much of what you've learned with the rest of us. Now the good news. Lots of great resources are available to nonprofits that want to take the first steps. Michele Goldstein with the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County will provide us with an overview of some of the available resources. Michele?
Thank you, Frank. I think if we look at this slide, we talk about spring and fall elections, and the point we're really trying to make here is that elections don't just come once every 4 years in a presidential election. They occur regularly at the local, state, and even national level. And that we encourage nonprofit organizations as they engage in voter education and registration to find ways to integrate doing this work on an ongoing basis, because voting happens every year and twice a year some years. Voting registration can be done year-round and just become an integral part of what an organization does, much in the way that Paula described in the work that they've done at the YWCA. There are many, many resources that are available. One of them, obviously, is the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County. And we have a number of ways that we can help nonprofit organizations, particularly now with the new online voter registration system in Wisconsin. We are placing a heavy focus on providing training to staff, board, volunteers, and any individual interested in both registering themselves to vote but also helping others. We also can provide work with nonprofit organizations to provide registration materials, brochures, stickers, buttons, templates, information they can adapt to meet their own needs and to meet their own clients' special needs, whether that be translating things into other languages or providing targeted information for specific populations like students or older citizens. We also can provide and are delighted to provide volunteer support for the work that nonprofits can do, so that we know that volunteer staffs are busy, busy, busy doing the work they do every day. So we have volunteers that can come in and help supplement as people provide the activities that they do. The League of Women Voters is really here for the long term, and we really want to encourage organizations to integrate this work into their ongoing work. Apart from our local league and the resources we can provide, there are many, many other resources out there, both nationally and locally. And a few are highlighted here on this slide. Nonprofit Vote is a national resource. It's a very, very excellent one for nonprofits who are beginning to get involved in the area of civic engagement and voter registration. Lots of resources there. Wisconsin Voices is a statewide organization. It's actually a network of over 50 nonprofit organizations committed to civic engagement, voter registration, and voter education. They're an excellent resource for connecting to other community resources and other organizations doing this work. BoardSource a national website that folks can go to is a terrific resource for boards of directors as they begin to explore how they can integrate civic engagement into their missions. And last but not least, the Milwaukee Election Commission, which is almost last but not least, the Milwaukee Election Commission and our state Wisconsin Election Commission both provide terrific support to individuals and organizations having questions about the process, needing to learn more about the process, and helping them do the work that they do. These are folks who really want to see that every eligible voter in the state of Wisconsin is registered to vote and has an opportunity to vote.
Thanks very much, Michele, and thanks to the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County. We'd like to end the program with a call to action and offer some next steps to take in your nonprofit organization. Next steps. First, determine where voter engagement work fits for your organization. Where does it fit in terms of your mission, your core values, your strategic priorities? And then develop a concrete plan for your nonprofit in terms of how voter engagement work will actually unfold. An important part of next steps is engaging and educating your board, your staff, and major donors and supporters. And we encourage you to use this video for that purpose. And then finally, meet with local resource providers. There are groups, as we've learned, that have been doing this kind of work successfully for a long time. They're eager to share their knowledge, their insights, and lessons learned with the rest of us. And in particular, we want to call out the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County and also Wisconsin Voices. We also want to extend special thanks to one of the resource organizations that we've highlighted, Nonprofit Vote. The organization has been around for quite a while and has been an important leader in this work. Our thanks to Nonprofit Vote for permission to use their materials on the subject of legal aspects of 501c3 nonprofit involvement in voter registration and engagement. For more information, we encourage you to contact the League of Women Voters. They're there to help, and they've certainly demonstrated that commitment over the years. This concludes today's program, Promoting Voter Registration and Engagement, What Nonprofits Can Do. Thanks again to our program partners, the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County, Southeast Asian Educational Development of Wisconsin, YWCA Southeast Wisconsin, and the City of Milwaukee Election Commission. We'd like to close with the following thought. Nonprofits have regular contact with thousands of people eligible to vote who are not yet registered. Nonprofits can turn these thousands into educated and engaged voters. The result will be sustained increases in voting, especially among young voters and those with a history of lower participation. Just imagine thousands of new, educated, engaged, and networked voters active in the political process. Things would be different. Things would be better.